So let's get going and let's begin by going through the Sunday papers. And a warm welcome. He's got up especially early. He's in the studio with me, Jason Reed. Good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Well, I don't know. I say I'm all right. You know, it's what is it? 7:15 on a Sunday.
As all right as you can be at that time.
Yeah, as all right as I can be. I made the mistake of going out last night. But what can you do?
Exactly.
I'm a social animal. Well, an animal anyway. Right, let's talk about the papers. And the front pages are kind of split between Rishi Sunak and what I think is something of a publicity coup by the Prime Minister suddenly pitching up in Kyiv. Let's talk about that first. Boris has gone to Ukraine. Now, the significant thing about this is Boris has set himself up as the point man, the sort of Western leader of all the Western nations in the West's coordinated response against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He's stolen a march on pretty much everyone else, especially Joe Biden. Only about a week ago, was it 10 days ago? Or was it this time last weekend? I can't remember. But Joe Biden went to Eastern Europe and the Americans pointedly announced the president cannot possibly go to Ukraine due to security reasons. Suddenly Boris is there. Something of a triumph for him.
It is. Whatever you think of Boris Johnson, he's done extremely well in response to what's going on in Ukraine, in particular in the last couple of days with this visit to the capital. There was that amazing video that he posted on his prime ministerial Twitter account and everything of him and President Zelensky walking around the streets of Kyiv as if nothing was wrong, you know, speaking to civilians there, shaking people's hands and people telling him how brilliant Britain was and how grateful they are for all the military support and all the political support. He has filled the void that's been left by the completely inept American leadership on the international stage, I think. And I think you're right that Britain has become, as Zelensky himself said, the leader of the international coalition in this fight to support Ukraine against Russian aggression.
I think I'm right in saying that Zelensky, when Boris was there, did not come out with his usual refrain of help us set up a no-fly zone. So I'm interpreting that as that we are now giving the Ukrainians so many weapons, so much military help, that he's sort of laying off the central request that they've had throughout this conflict, which is, for God's sake, protect our skies. So we're still not doing that, but Zelensky seems pretty happy with the response that Boris Johnson is leading.
Well, Zelensky's been very, very clear that he thinks Boris Johnson is his best friend on the international stage. He thinks Britain is Ukraine's greatest ally at the moment. And you're right, he has been calling for a no-fly zone. He's been doing it non-stop when he spoke to the American Congress, when he spoke to the European Union, to the Italian Parliament, to the Canadian Parliament, all these different international bodies. But with Britain, it seems that as a result of all the support we're giving, including, of course, this recent announcement of another £100 million worth of military support, that Zelensky is so grateful that he's willing to, you know, do the photo op with Boris and big him up because he's so happy about everything that we're doing for him.
What do you think this conflict's heading, Jason? Because the Russians have kind of gone quiet. Their invasion seems to have stalled, although they continue to, of course, pummel the cities of Mariupol, Chernihiv, Kharkiv. There does seem to be this kind of emphasis now on the part of the Kremlin that they want to that they've given up their ambitions to control Ukraine. I think they've realised that that's not possible. You can't, if you've got 43 million people that's saying no, you cannot take control of a country. So Putin seems to have switched his plans to just annihilating this country, literally reducing it to rubble. That's a worry.
It's hard to overstate what's happened in Ukraine in the last few weeks in terms of the amazing resistance that the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people have shown. Nobody was predicting anywhere near this level of resistance when Russia began their invasion. Everybody thought that it was just a matter of time before Russia were able to flatten Ukraine and overthrow the government. And so the fact that just a few weeks in they've had to, as they called it, end phase one of the war, but as we know it, give up on taking over all of Ukraine and subsuming the government, that's incredibly embarrassing. It's humiliating for Russia, which of course likes to think of itself as a superpower. And the way they're behaving now with attacking civilians at train stations, attacking people trying to leave, just indiscriminately shooting people, it seems, at times, that's not what you do when you're in control. It's not what you do when you're winning a war. It's not what a country does when they're feeling powerful. These are signs of desperation. And so there's hope now, I think, increasingly, that Ukraine might be able to hold on to the sovereignty of the Donbas regions as well and effectively win the war.
Russia is a superpower for one reason, and that is it spends most of its wealth, such as it is, on weapons.
Yeah.
A massively disproportionate amount of the Russian budget goes on its military might. That's why it's a superpower. But it is finding out right now that you can have all the weapons in the world, but you need to get competent people to fire them, and you need to get competent people to drive the tanks that you spent so much money on. And Russia appears to have been deficient in these areas, insofar as whilst they've got weapons and tanks and military equipment coming out of their ears, they're completely incompetent.
Right from the beginning, they did everything wrong. Their initial excuse for invading about denazifying Ukraine was very obviously nonsense, and didn't take long for the soldiers, it seems, to realise that it was nonsense and that they were not being sent to do military exercises in Belarus or to denazify Ukraine. And so they were shocked by what they were then asked to do. And so, as I say, it's been embarrassing. As you say, Russia is a superpower because of its supposed military prowess. And so the fact that they have been unable to make any significant gains in Ukraine and to hold that land just goes to show what a catastrophic failure this has been. And of course, a lot of this comes down to the lack of leadership that goes on in Russia. The way that Vladimir Putin behaves, he supposedly doesn't use the internet. He has a landline phone. He relies on what his advisors tell him. There have been reports that advisors have been lying to him, perhaps unsurprisingly. I don't want to be the guy to give Putin bad news.
Does he not use the internet because he's an old guy and he's from another age, or is that for security reasons?
It's unclear. I think there's probably an element of both. I mean, he's a little bit odd on this kind of thing. When he was meeting other world leaders a few months ago, he insisted on being 20 metres apart from them because he was terrified of getting COVID.
They said about that massive table. Yeah, he's coronaphobic in the extreme, and they said that table, which is about 50 foot long. And was it the president of Moldova turned up there, and he assumed that he had to sit next to it, so he walked all the way down to where Putin was sitting. He assumed he'd be sitting next to him. He said, no, you have to go to the other end of the table. And it's like, well, I can't hear him there. And people said that the reason that Russia was invading Ukraine was because it needed more territory for Putin's table. I mean... But he's said to be sort of in a bunker somewhere. This is probably it's not probably, it's definitely what this conflict revolves around. The mentality of Vladimir Putin. What is going on in his mind? I mean, it seems pathetic that a country like Russia is spending its time just effectively now just going into a neighbouring country and trying to flatten the cities to the ground and kill as many civilians as possible. I mean, what on earth is the point of that?
It's not surprising that we're hearing reports of a lot of disdain at the top of Putin's government from his most senior officials, that they are horrified about, first of all, the decision to invade Ukraine and then how badly it's been managed since then. If you think back to the speech or the couple of speeches he gave in the early days of the invasion, he sounded like some kind of rambling, deranged madman terrorist talking about how Ukraine never really existed and that he was, fighting the good fight by removing the Nazis from Ukraine, all of which is total nonsense. Of course, but it seems that he really believes it. He's fallen off his rocker, and it's unclear what he's going to decide to do next.
Yeah, I mean, people say, "Oh, don't dismiss Vladimir Putin as a madman. He's very clever. He is very clever, but I also think there's something slightly deranged about what's going on here. And if we accept the argument that Vladimir Putin is not in full possession of his wits at the moment. Some people say he's on steroids due to cancer and he's suffering from a kind of roid rage, but whatever the reason, it's hard to see the logic of some of the things he's doing. So that is the worry, isn't it? That we have this incredibly powerful man who's slightly deranged, and now that his back's against the wall, now that this invasion has become one massive great embarrassment to him, will he start resorting to what he did in Syria, biological and chemical weapons, even worse, maybe even nuclear? That is the worry, isn't it?
I think it's concerning when we hear people on the other side of the argument use this exact point that Putin doesn't appear to be acting rationally, maybe he's lost his senses, as an argument for not helping Ukraine. And we can't give them weapons, we can't be seen to support Zelensky. But that's not how it works at all. Ukraine is fighting for freedom and democracy and sovereignty, the basic values that we all share. Zelensky said, I think it was this morning, that Russia's threat is a threat to all of Europe, not just Ukraine, which is absolutely true. And of course we don't want to start a nuclear war, but at the same time we need to be doing absolutely everything we can to put Russia back in its box. We can't set a precedent of allowing them to take territory by invading other countries.
Mystery still surrounds why the West, particularly Joe Biden, us as well though, spent about 3 weeks announcing exactly what we would not do. We will not set up a fly zone. We will not escalate this crisis. What we should have been saying is don't push your luck, Mr. Putin, because we have plans and keep them sort of mysterious. But instead, we kept giving him the confidence to carry on by telling him that, don't worry, we won't set up a fly zone. It's all right, carry on. And I think what I'm getting at is that this week, I mean, I'm not sure if we will go as far as a fly zone, but there's definitely an escalation in the West's hostility towards Russia. So Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, this week announced we know the age of engagement with Russia is now over. That's effectively to say Russia is now the official enemy of the West. More and more weapons are being sent to Ukraine. The Czech Republic sent tanks in. That's a NATO country. That was very significant. Boris has gone to Kyiv, committed more. So the level of support we're giving Ukraine and the rhetoric is definitely on the rise, and I'm wondering if we are edging, however slowly, towards probably setting up this no-fly zone in the end.
Well, I think if Russia was to escalate further, such as by using biological or chemical weapons, that would probably be the one card that we've got in our back pocket that we can still play. I think it seems that Putin was planning or hoping to use chemical weapons at some point. He started laying false flags and saying, oh, look at the American bioweapons factories and things like this.
He goes everywhere he goes. He's got a big heavy security guy who's got the nuclear button bag with him everywhere he goes.
It's incredible.
Very pointedly being seen with him, So, he's certainly threatening nuclear action.
He's realising, I think, more and more that we are not going to be as cowed as maybe we might once have been by that threat of nuclear war, because we know that he knows if he presses that button, it's the end of the world. And is he willing to do that? I don't think he is.
We've got to be very, very careful about escalating this, and we certainly have to be very cautious about this no-fly zone. But the timidity with which we treated Putin for at least 3 weeks was a real error in judgment, I thought.
Yeah, when you look back on it now with hindsight, it does seem a bit bonkers that when Russia was amassing this incredible number of military forces on Ukraine's border, and we all thought, there's not going to be an invasion, nothing's going to happen here, we can just sort of look the other way and say, Liz
Nothing
Truss...
to see here.
Exactly. Liz Truss did that visit to Kyiv where she sort of told off Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, and then we went back home again, and then everything sort of went back to normal. And then we were all surprised when Russia invaded Ukraine. We got to learn from this, I think.
I think we haven't seen the last of this Western escalation. I think our involvement in this conflict will get more and more pronounced. So we are, Jason. I'm with Jason Reed, social and political commentator, and he is the UK lead of the Young Voices organisation. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan. This is Talk Radio.
Live on your smart TV.
Kevin O'Sullivan on Talk Radio.
I'm with Jason Reed, political and social commentator. We're going through the Sunday papers. We've just done Ukraine, where the Prime Minister has been visiting. A bit of a PR triumph for him there. But I'll tell you someone who's not having a triumph right now. That is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Extraordinary stories today that he's moved his family out of Downing Street. Removal vans seen yesterday, and they pitched back to their palatial home in West London. That's a rather pointed move, isn't it?
It is. It is quite a decision. I think that Rishi Sunak has well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that he's not been handling the story particularly well. I think the problem is that he's been playing politics on easy mode for so long, because he was elevated to the position of Chancellor when Sajid Javid had his falling out with Dominic Cummings, and then since then Rishi Sunak, his job has been doling out money in the form of furlough and, of course, Eat Out to Help Out with his own personal branding all over it. And now we're returning to normal times. The pandemic is over, and we've got this scandal about his wife's tax affairs, and all of a sudden he's calling himself the victim of a leak, and he was calling this morning for an inquiry into where the leak might have come from. He's moving his family out.
Yeah, I'll tell you why he won't get that inquiry, because, because the leak potentially, I'm only speculating, could have come from next door, Rishi.
It
might be the guy that doesn't want you to take over as Prime Minister. Who knows?
It does seem a little bit sort of suspicious, doesn't it? CSI Miami, who's got the most to gain from this? Well, it does seem that Boris Johnson's got the most to gain.
We're only speculating, folks. No one knows where this leak came from, but the leak did come, and it came at a pointed moment, and because of it, because the nation now knows that Rishi Sunak's wife wasn't keen on paying the taxes that her husband imposed on the rest of us. His career is unravelling spectacularly, and he must have moved out of Downing Street to go back to West London to make some kind of statement. At a time like this, you wouldn't do it unless you were doing it deliberately, would you?
I think it might just be that he's having a bit of a hissy fit, a bit of a tantrum, because he's not been in this position before in his time, certainly in a senior position in Cabinet. He's not had his face on the newspapers because of a personal scandal for days on end, and so he doesn't really know how to react, and so he's saying, oh, I'm going to resign, and I've moved my family out, because he doesn't know how to deal with it. He doesn't have the political experience or the maturity to deal with it, and so he just finds himself in this pickle where his wife now has agreed to pay the taxes in the UK after all, which, I mean, if they'd done that to begin with, they would have saved themselves a lot of hassle.
Which, of course, you know, I'm glad she's done that. It's because the optics, wasn't breaking any laws. She was paying British tax on her British income, but the vast majority of her massive income, I mean, she's worth £500 million apparently. I was saying £200 million. I was corrected. So it's just, in her own right, is apparently worth about 500 million. Her father's a billionaire, so she had chosen to declare herself non-domicile, and therefore only pay taxes on the majority of her income in India. She's still an Indian citizen, and avoid it here. So they were busy putting out signs that, there's nothing wrong with this. It's totally legal. The Mrs. Sunak has done nothing wrong. And then the next day she suddenly announces, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to be non-dom anymore. I'm going to pay British tax on my entire global income. That is an admission that what she was doing before was wrong.
It's amazing.
Not legally or technically wrong, but kind of morally wrong, and certainly damaging to her husband's career.
It's amazing what a bit of sunlight can do when you cast some light on these issues. Suddenly everyone's position changes. Of course, some people have come out of the woodwork to defend Akshata Murthy, Rishi Sunak's wife, over this, and they're saying, well, of course, if you had the opportunity to pay less tax, why wouldn't you? The difference is that's their situation they find themselves in is not a situation anyone else finds themselves in, because there are very few people who have millions of pounds worth of dividends coming in from a company in India and using, very advanced methods to dodge tax on it. And of course, there are questions now about Rishi Sunak having a US green card, which, first of all, appears to be forbidden because you're not allowed to work for a foreign government if you have a green card.
Give that back, to be fair, but both of them had green cards because they used to live in California, and they kept those. He did have that green card a suspiciously long time. He's given it back now, but there's that. There's also he's been listed as a beneficiary of tax haven trusts held by his wife in the British Virgin Islands and the Cayman Islands. He's actually listed as a financial beneficiary for that. So it's all getting murkier and murkier. And as the Daily Mail said yesterday, the problem with this story is it makes Mr. and Mrs. Sunak look as if they're the kind of people who say paying taxes is for the little people, and the little people is you, me, every other citizen in this country who has to hand over a sizable portion of our incomes to the state. Mrs. Sunak chose not to do it. I have no problem with the non-dom system, but I do if it's the Chancellor of the Exchequer's wife, the man who is in charge of charging us our taxes.
Exactly, that's exactly the point, isn't it? Non-dom status is not that unusual or remarkable. The reason this is in the newspapers is because it's the Chancellor's wife, and not just the wife of any Chancellor, but the wife of the Chancellor who is overseeing the highest tax burden in 7 decades. And so if he was if they both of them were earning this amount of money and operating their taxes in this way, and they were working in banking or elsewhere in the private sector, nobody would know about it and nobody would care about it. The difference is that he's the one making the rules for the rest of us. He's the one raising taxes for the rest of us, and meanwhile he's using various methods, he and his household, it seems, using various methods to get around paying their fair share while the rest of us have to fork out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering what Rishi is trying to say by moving out of Downing Street, because, as I say, he didn't move out of Downing Street at this time just randomly. There's a reason for this. He's trying to make some kind of declaration, and the word is he might be set to quit politics altogether. There's a suspicion that he loved it when he was the fairy godmother giving everyone furlough money, and now we're in the period where we've got to pay it back. People don't like him anymore. His spring statement was a catastrophe, and he's as you say, he's a relatively rookie politician who is looking like a kind of guy who doesn't like the flip side of politics. He loves it when people like you, but he can't take it when they don't.
Exactly right. The picture of the removal van just outside Downing Street reminded me of the picture of when Dominic Cummings left Number 10 and he deliberately went out the front entrance carrying a big cardboard box full of papers, which was obviously a stunt for the cameras. In the same way, Rishi Sunak knows that the world's eyes are on him at the moment, and he wants everyone to see that he's not happy and that he's had a falling out with Boris, it seems, and that maybe he is considering quitting politics, which I think would be an astonishing overreaction to having a few weeks of tricky time in politics, and just goes to show that having been in cabinet for 5 minutes, he is not ready to lead this country.
To be honest with you, allowing his wife to be non-dom is what they call in politics an error of judgment, and he's really paying the price. Let's move on to a few other stories. Sunday Times, page 7. Le Pen spies chance to prove mightier than Macron status quo. What the hell does that mean? But what it does mean is that Macron is in the fight of his life. Marine Le Pen is tipped to possibly win the next election.
Yes, the presidential election in France was looking like it was going to be an easy landslide win of a second term for President Macron, but the polls have narrowed quite sharply in the last few weeks, with right-wing party leader Marine Le Pen surging in the polls, along with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is on the left, a sort of pseudo-communist, almost Jeremy Corbyn-type figure on the left. Because of the strange way that the French presidential election works, where they have a runoff system where the final 2 candidates get to have an additional second round of voting, some people are speculating that there might be enough people who are unhappy with President Macron that they might be willing to unite behind Marine Le Pen and just about tip her over the 50% to win the presidency, which would be something quite astonishing and in Brussels would not be welcomed, that's for sure.
Yeah, interestingly, the reason Marine Le Pen is suddenly flourishing, apparently, is because she's gaining a lot of support from young people. So France has for some time been lurching to the right. She represents some pretty extreme right-wing views, and the young people are going with her. So, I mean, France is very conservative. I'm always slightly sceptical about these stories. Macron are set to lose election. They always go with the safe option in France in the end. So we'll wait to see what happens. But he's certainly in a much bigger fight than he thought he would be. Let's move on. We're going to talk about a story in the Daily Telegraph. We're being left behind on hydrogen. A fixation on electricity is our problem, apparently. So as the government seems to flip-flop every single day on its new energy strategy, Boris Johnson, of course, implicitly finally admitting, guess what? You can't power this country on windmills and solar panels alone. So when he announced 8 new nuclear power stations this week, building them in a world record time of 1 year per power plant, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. He says that all these power stations will be built by 2030. No, they won't. But in this announcement, suddenly the word hydrogen started cropping up. Nuclear, hydrogen. Hang on, where did hydrogen come from? So explain what this story is all about.
So this is JCB boss Lord Bamford has been complaining that the government is not listening to the benefits of other fuels for construction vehicles, such as hydrogen, because there are fears supposedly within some quarters of government that blue hydrogen, as it's called, is made from natural gas, and so it's not sufficiently green and eco for this new age of net zero wonderfulness. But I think this is just a kind of another aspect of the lack of free thinking that we have in the energy debate at the moment. Very clearly, we need diversity of energy sources. The one thing we've learnt from this whole debacle is that we cannot continue just buying all our energy from one place, especially if that place is Russia. And we've been talking to Saudi Arabia about oil, and that's all fine. But if we're just going to transfer to another quite dodgy dictatorship, that's not going to be a solution at all. So maybe we need to be looking at hydrogen. We need to be looking at, for example, biofuels, which I think are dramatically underused in this country, and maybe investing in things like nuclear power that take a little bit longer as well. In other words, we need a bit of creative thinking, we need a little bit of ingenuity going on at the top of government to solve this energy crisis somehow, which just does not seem to be happening.
Yeah, nuclear is the future, but most experts say to build a single nuclear power plant takes between 10 and 15 years. So Boris, in his time-honoured fashion, just saying, "Oh, we'll do it in 6 months." No, you won't. But thanks for telling us. It's just salesmanship. Just before you go, Jason, thanks for coming in so early, by the way. Simon Cowell exclusive in The Sun. He's talking about his e-bike crash. He's ditched Botox. That's a big story.
It is.
He's talking about a potential X Factor relaunch, but of course he's giving this interview because next week, oh my God, it's Britain's Got Talent again. When will they free us from the curse of Britain's Got Talent?
It must be soon. I mean, I've not seen the ratings, but they can't be good at this point. Britain's Got Talent's been going for about a century. He's talking about trying to get X Factor going again, which just goes to show that he's got no new ideas at this point. But as you say, the most eye-catching part of the interview is the fact that he supposedly ditched Botox. I mean, he must, in the photo, he doesn't look all that different, but I'd imagine his face is going to start drooping at some point because he's been held up by, he's had more plastic in his face than the Pacific Ocean for most of his life. So it can't last very long without any Botox. And he managed to crash his electric bike, which I'm sure must have been a very painful experience as well.
He did do himself some serious harm there. And then he's talking about an X Factor relaunch. No, don't relaunch the X Factor, Simon. We don't want that back. In fact, I think most of us have had enough of Britain's Got Talent. It's like something from another age. Of course, I said just before you go just now, Jason, but you're not going. You're staying with me until 9 o'clock.
Trying to get rid of me.
Because let's face it, at this kind of hour, I need someone to hold my hand. When we come back, we'll be talking about the latest sporting headlines with TalkSport's excellent Tom Clayton. I'm with Jason Reed. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan. This is Talk Radio. Welcome to Sunday morning. Can't believe I'm in it. Went out last night, Saturday night and all that, and got up at 4:30. Not a good idea. Jason Reed is back with me. He was up. When did you get up this morning, Jason?
About the same. About
the same. It's great, isn't it? Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love it.
I think next time I'm going straight through. Come straight from the bar to the studio. See how that works out. I feel like I have. Now, we're into the second hour of this 3-hour radio spectacular. And we're going to talk later in the hour about Picasso. Obviously a genius artist, but a new book points out that he was an evil genius, a veritable monster to women.
Really?
So we'll be talking about how he was beautiful on the canvas, but not so beautiful when he was away from the palette. Also, you'll like this, Jason. Sajid Javid wants to stick vitamin E in all our food. Force feed us the sunshine vitamin. Now, I'm not against health initiatives, but my God, I don't think the government should be force feeding us anything. I'm not sure about this fluoride that they put in the water. They shouldn't be doing this by stealth. Anyway, we'll talk about that. Also, you'll like this as well, Jason. They've installed happiness buttons in number 10 for the staff.
Happiness buttons?
Yes, like a little machine. It's got the little emojis of a smiley face and a miserable face. And
do you get a morphine injection when you press it?
And they have to press, what kind of day they're having. They have to press, I'm happy today. Ding! That's all. That's in number 10 Downing Street.
What's the point of that?
Exactly. That's what the government's spending our money on. So we'll be talking about those two governmental initiatives later in the hour. A bit of Picasso and your calls. 0344 499 1000. I'm still with Jason Reid from Young Voices UK. He's not getting out of this, is he, old Rishi?
He's not. I think he's finally learning what it means to be in the spotlight at the top level of politics, and he's finding out what it feels like to have the world snooping on your personal finances, which probably isn't pleasant, especially when you realise that you've been employing all these practices that most people don't have access to and wouldn't have even considered. I mean, reportedly, Akshata Murthy was paying about £30,000 a year just for the privilege of having NonDom status, which I think I'm right in saying is more than the average salary in this country, that she was paying just to have this special tax status to avoid paying taxes on her dividends from her, is it her father's Indian IT company?
Yeah, well, I mean, she's got a major share of that company. Her father is a tech billionaire, and she's become very wealthy because of it. She's worth, they say, £500 million herself. And to be fair, Rishi Sunak is also a very wealthy man in his own right. And again, in fairness to Rishi, he made that fortune himself. He was a serious whiz kid in the city, a hedge funder, and a very successful one as well. Pretty much a billionaire in his own right. I suspect he might be heading back to the city fairly soon, don't you?
Exactly right. Yeah, good for him, making his money in the city and going into politics to bring his wisdom from the industry and so on. The problem only arises when he then tries to circumvent the rules that he is literally responsible for setting for everyone else. He's the Chancellor, he's in charge of the economy, he's in charge of setting the tax rules that the rest of us have to obey. But as you were saying earlier, it feels very much like one rule for us and one rule for them, because they have their own special ways, using green cards and using non-dom status to get around it one way or another to avoid paying the tax that the rest of us have to pay. And it's just not fair, and people aren't standing for it.
And to be honest with you, Rishi Sunak wanted to be Prime Minister. He wanted to take over from Boris as the leader of the Tory party only about a couple of months ago. Seemed like that was imminent. Now I think it's never going to happen, and the reason that Rishi deserves this fate is it's a terrible error of judgment on his part to think that as the man who sets the taxes, it's okay for his wife to avoid them.
It's a really fundamental, basic error that he's made, which speaks, I think, to his political judgment more broadly. And we've seen in the polls that Conservative Home do of Tory members, he was very, very high in the polls when Partygate was at its height and people were talking about him as the obvious successor to Boris Johnson. His poll ratings have plummeted. People are furious about this. It's the first real Rishi Sunak scandal that we've had, and it's unclear whether he's actually going to make
it.
It is. It's a very substantial one, yeah. And we don't know whether he's going to make it through the other side of it now.
Exactly. Much still to come. Are you an art fan? Fan of art?
I mean, I'd like to. I probably shouldn't say that.
You don't know much about art, but you know what you like. Is that
exactly?
What
there you go.
Well, we're going to talk about Picasso in a little while. We're also going to talk later in the show about why saffron is so valuable. I don't see the point of saffron. I don't think it tastes of anything. Changes the colour of your food, but doesn't really add a whole lot of taste to it, if you ask me.
Just sort of makes things yellow,
and it
doesn't
costs
it?
about £1 million for a teaspoon worth. What's that about? So we're trying to find out why it's so expensive later in the show. But next up, we're going to be talking about vitamin D. The government's going to force feed us the sunshine.
Aren't we lucky?
Isn't that special? Nanny state, folks. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan. I'm with Jason Reid. This is Talk Radio.
This is
it just me, or is this story rather disconcerting? Sajid Javid has launched a bid to add vitamin D, that's the sunshine vitamin, to everyday food and drinks to improve public health. In other words, he's going to fortify food and drink that we buy and effectively force feed us vitamin D. Vitamin D is, of course, a vitamin that lots of Brits suffer a deficiency of because you get it from sunshine, and of course, as hawk-eyed listeners would have noticed, we don't get much sunshine in this country, so it's well worth taking. It's one of the few supplements that doctors say you really should think about. Yes, think about taking vitamin D pills, but should the government be force feeding us? You know, I want to make these decisions. I might decide I don't want vitamin D, so I don't like the idea of this.
TV.
Kevin O'Sullivan on Talk Radio.
I'm with Jason Reed from Young Voices UK. He doesn't know much about art, but he knows what he likes. He was just explaining to me, and I said that's the most cliched thing I've ever heard.
Radio.
The home of common sense. Now on the telly.
I'm with Jason Reed from Young Voices UK. We've got some texts and tweets coming in. This is from Martin Cassels. This is on Twitter. This is about vitamin D. I think you'll find just people in Europe are deficient in vitamin D. That was a major factor in COVID deaths and having bad COVID symptoms. I'm not sure it was a major factor or even a factor at all. I don't know about the medical side of that. But they did say that if you kept up your vitamin E levels, it might be good in terms of helping you resist against COVID. But people here are deficient in it because it is the one vitamin you can assimilate through your skin when the sun shines. So they don't have much vitamin D deficiency, you know, in the Mediterranean, but they do in Yorkshire, if you see what I mean. Right, we've got Sam Carr has tweeted in. I thought vitamin D wasn't important or not important until they decide it is. When many professionals said this should have been a recommendation at the start of COVID, why not advise people to take it and advise what food has it in? Is that too difficult? Well, yeah, exactly. I don't mind people saying take vitamin D because it's good for you, and you may well be deficient because there isn't much sunshine in Britain. What I do take exception to is the idea of the government stealthily force feeding it to us. You know, I'll make my decisions about what healthy vitamins I want to take very much. Thanks very much. And here's one from Pete. I don't want Sajid Javid force feeding me vitamin D. I have a better solution. I'll go for a walk. Yeah. But if it's like raining, Pete, you might not get much vitamin D out of that. Do you take vitamin D, Jason?
I don't. I'm not planning to. Have I woken up in a parallel universe? This is Britain. It's the 21st century.
Yes, talk radio.
Very good point. Yes. It's Britain. It's the 21st century. We've got a Tory government. Why are they talking about putting things in our food? If Cadbury's wants to start putting vitamin D in chocolate, that's fine, because we can all decide whether to buy Cadbury's or not. But when the government centrally decides that we need certain vitamins in our food and we need to, ingest it even if we don't consent to it, this is completely deranged. Why does Sajid Javid's mind even go there?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it's nanny statism gone mad, and that's the problem with the COVID crisis, with the pandemic. Almost by definition, the government had to become rather nanny statish, and it's gone to its head.
It has. They've had a power trip, and they can't give up the power they've given us. And in fact, one of the people tweeting in was trying to link it to COVID. I don't know about you, but we've had 2 years of COVID discourse. I've not heard vitamin D mentioned once. I don't think there is any substantial connection between COVID and vitamin D.
People did say it. They said if you keep up, you should try to keep up vitamin C, vitamin D intake, and it will help you in terms of resisting COVID. They said, and it is a notorious vitamin that Brits are deficient in, because you get it not necessarily from food. You get it from the sunshine, and we don't get much sunshine here, which is why Boris Johnson's plan to power the country via solar panels is the stuff of cloud cuckoo land. A bit like the wind turbines. Great. What about when it's not windy?
Well, we don't have any electricity there, presumably.
What do you make of all that? I mean, it's the energy policy this announced this week. I mean, it's just like pick a policy, any policy, and this is predicated. The new government's policy is to build 8 new nuclear power stations and to continue to increase our number of wind turbines and solar panels. But it's incoherent, isn't it? It doesn't really make any sense, and it's certainly not going to cure any problems tomorrow because nuclear power stations take a long time to build.
Exactly. Yeah, the energy crisis we have right now is not going to be solved, even if we do manage to build however many nuclear power stations it is by 2030. It's, as you say, it's just a sort of pop-up book of energy policies, isn't it? Picked almost at random. It's almost like he was strategically trying to annoy everyone and not please anyone with this energy policy. It's not going to make our bills go down. It's not going to do anything to help people pay their utility bills, and it's not going to do anything to move us towards net zero, and we shouldn't be moving towards net zero anyway without thinking about the costs. He's just got it wrong in every conceivable way because he's chasing this green dream that we know is a wild goose chase.
It really is. So we're hoping to talk to Brendan in Hartlepool. I'm hoping to get through to him as soon as we can. He's rung in. We're having some connection problems. But you're a football fan, are you, Jason?
Within reason, yeah.
So
same as the art. I know what I like.
Big match this afternoon. Don't know much about sport, but you know what you
Exactly.
like. Big match this afternoon.
Big match this afternoon. Liverpool, Man City. Maybe very significant when it comes to the Premier League titles. Not much in it.
I think it will be. I think it could be the decider. But that's not the big match. The big match is at Fulham. Yeah, actually, we're playing at home to Coventry City, and we're like 8 points clear at the top of the table, so we're looking good. But the one sort of downside of this fixture is when we played Coventry at Coventry, we were looking very good as well, and they beat us 4-1. So it's
bit of a bad omen.
I'll be heading down the cottage with some trepidation this afternoon. Let's go up to Hartlepool, talk to Brendan. Morning, Brendan.
Good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
Jeremy?
Jeremy, you got to make over Jeremy, haven't you?
Kevin, yeah.
I know, Kevin. It's back a few weeks. I don't really remember.
No, that's right. We did it before, didn't we? Sorry, it's a bit early, Brendan. You're being a bit too sharp-witted for me at this time of day on a Sunday. You want to talk about Rishi? What's up?
Yeah, well, I reckon he had a good COVID, as I say, and so these attacks on him and his missus, they're either led by Boris, because he doesn't want the leadership challenge.
Oh, perish the thought, Brendan.
Or they're led by Sakia, because if Boris goes and Rishi gets in, Rishi's got a bit of personality which Sakia doesn't have. So it would be bad for him at the next election. So I reckon that's where these are coming from.
Well, look, the thing about Rishi Sunak, in fairness to him, when he became a minister, he declared his wife's non-Dom status, so he was above board in that respect. But these matters are not announced to the public, obviously. But certain people will, of course, have known that he declared this. And yes, it's easy to say that these leaks about Mrs. Sunak's non-Dom status came from the Labour Party. That's the sort of kind of catch-all place where they may have emanated from, because you go straight to the rival political parties. But I think a lot of people in Westminster, Brendan, are speculating that this leak might have come from a little closer to number 10 Downing Street.
Definitely, yes, you're right.
Yeah, because Boris isn't keen on the rise of Sunak.
He's not, for obvious reasons, and there were rumours that one of the early Partygate photos might have been taken from number 11 even.
Yeah, remember that, Brendan?
Yes, of course, yeah.
There was that picture, the famous picture of them all swigging wine one sunny afternoon in the middle of the lockdown in the garden, and the picture could only have been taken from number 11 Downing Street. Just remind me, who lives at number 11 Downing Street?
Well, I know, but doesn't Boris have the flat there?
Yeah, actually, technically, but you're right. But where this picture came from?
Yes, you're right.
Because what happens is,
Rishiville.
It came from Rishi, where Rishi's office is. So
exactly.
his office is in number 11. What do you think about it, Brendan, though, the fact that until yesterday, Mrs Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer's wife, was avoiding British tax? Are you angry about that? Because I think
no, not at all. She's. I mean, what if she pays vast amount more than I do, and anyway, even if she didn't change it to all the taxes in the UK, she's a very rich woman, and good luck to her. And her family are rich in India, I believe. So, she wasn't breaking any law, so you can't really... Yes, it's the spirit of the law. I did listen to you early on, but she wasn't breaking it. She has tax advisors who will pay lots of money to.
Can you afford tax advisors, Brendan?
If I had an income of 700 million, I might do, but I don't. But listen, I don't. She pays far more in tax than I do. Anyway,
I think
a lot more again.
Yeah, it's a fair point. A lot of people are saying that, but it seems to have pretty much scuppered his career. Yeah. You can't have the wife of the Chancellor of the Exchequer avoiding the taxes that her husband imposes on the rest of us. It's a bad look, Brendan.
And now it is. I appreciate that. What's it going to be in 2 years' time? There'll be something else, won't there?
They really were.
People remember.
Yeah, really were. What are you doing for the rest of the day then, Brendan?
Well, at the moment, I'm about to go and watch Leicester play Crystal Palace. My grandson is a fanatical Leicester fan. Okay. But I should be listening very closely later on to the Liverpool match against Man City. Yeah. And I'm very happy that we seem to have bought your rising starlet.
Oh yeah, he's such a great player. He's going to be £100 million player. I'll be watching him. I'll be watching him myself this afternoon at Craven Cottage while we've still got him. Brendan, great call. Lovely to talk to you as always. Brendan from Hartlepool. Rishi, bad look, isn't it? It's a bad look.
Bad look. It's a textbook case of one rule for them and one rule for everyone else. And it's just, Rishi could have been in any position in cabinet when this story broke, but the fact that he's the Chancellor, the fact that he's in charge of setting the tax rules, the fact that he's come under scrutiny anyway for raising taxes and calling himself a tax-cutting Tory and still being the one to raise taxes to that 70-year high. And then on top of all that, it turns out that in his personal life and in his family life, he and his wife are employing creative methods to pay a little bit less tax. I see what Brendan was saying there, of course. Akshata Murty is obviously very wealthy and pays a lot of tax anyway, but that, if anything, means it's even more damaging when she doesn't pay the tax in this country, because we miss out on a lot more money.
I did Graham's show on Friday, the 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. when the story broke and the phone's ringing off the hook. Lots of people say she's done nothing wrong. She hasn't broken the law. Loads of them say, well, she can't pay. She can't pay this tax. She can't pay. I said, look, tax is actually voluntary. If you fancy writing out a cheque right now, you or I, for £1 million to the Inland Revenue, they'll take the money.
The cheque would bounce, but they try to take the money.
Like all my cheques to the Inland Revenue. HMRSC, or what they call themselves now. And so non-dom is a voluntary decision.
Yeah.
So you can either go non-dom, but if you want, you don't have to. And that's the option she should have chosen. And it proves that non-dom is voluntary because she volunteered to give up that status yesterday.
There's a lot of sort of manoeuvring going on. One of the things that Rishi Sunak said when the story first broke is that, I could never ask my wife to give up her Indian citizenship. But hang on a minute, nobody asked her to give up Indian citizenship. She can be an Indian citizen, that's completely fine.
You'll always be that. You can't give up your citizenship.
Well, there you go, of course. That's got nothing to do with her not paying tax in the UK on her income.
You can have it taken away from you. Ashimame Begun. Now, thank you so much, Jason. It's been great for you to be with me for the last 2 years, and I've enjoyed your company too.
Thank you.